Morning Year 12. What we're going to look at today is fairly obvious from this, hopefully. We're going to look at the idea of power, electrical power, which is the whole point of circuits. Okay? Electrical circuits are designed to deliver energy to some useful place, into a motor to make things move, into a heater to warm your house, into a kettle, heat again, etc. So all of this is the main reason we actually have electrical circuits. Without them, they'd be pointless. However, energy and power are slightly different, and energy doesn't really make much sense with electricity. It's because, as you are well aware, I'm sure, your parents are always telling you to turn the lights off because you are saving energy, or saving the bills, reducing the bills, more of which we'll pick up on. But yeah, of course it is. Time makes the difference. So what we're going to do is look at how much each component, for example, bulb, and this is how I always think of power, this is my kind of logic, it's how quickly it's throwing out that energy. So a really low power bulb might be throwing out a little bit of energy. If we turn up the power, there'll be a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. So what's written on the bulb isn't what we're talking about. Okay, when it says 11 watts, whatever. That's the power when it's at the correct voltage. But if you turn the voltage down, you're supplying energy at a lower rate, less bags of energy given to the charges. Well, obviously you get less energy being carried, but each charge carries less energy or is given less energy by the cell. And so therefore less comes out. But we can increase the voltage to increase more. Bottom line though is, what is power? How quickly, the rate at which it's throwing out that energy, transferring that energy into light form. Okay, so electromagnetic form. So nice and short, little thing. It is mainly about the practice, so just want to pick up on the most obvious bits. Okay, power. What is the definition of power? It is, of course, the rate of work done. Still true. Okay, so it's the rate of work done. So how much work done every second, or in that moment, how quickly it's coming out. So I will put in, to my mind, say how quickly energy is transferred. And although I think of light for electricity, it's usually heat, yeah, or a magnetic effect, motors. So it's how quickly, to my mind, light comes out. That's the image that always sticks in my brain. Okay, so that's our principle. Okay, and we can work it backwards, but actually we've got everything we need. So we'll go through and we will not deduce, actually we'll derive the equation. So perhaps I need to change that header there. So how electrically can we do this? Well, it makes it much easier to think of it in terms of the definitions we already got. Work done given to each charge, or work done moving each charge, is defined by our voltage equation. So EMF was the energy or work done given to each charge. PD was the work done by each charge, or energy taken from each charge. Okay, so from our definition for potential difference, we'll use both of them are exact equivalent. Let's do both. There we go. It's the work done per charge. Okay, so in terms of usefulness, let's think of the idea of energy maybe. Work done equals QV. Okay. If you prefer, change in energy equals QV, but the one on the data book is what the process is, because it's all about delivery. Okay, so to my mind, this one is far less important than that. So if we go from there, we know that Q itself is not very helpful. We can't measure it, but we do know that Q equals IT. Okay, so if we think of how much charge flows, it all depends on how much time. So if we substitute that into there, then what we get is the total work done is going to be ITV. Okay, so, or VIT if you prefer. So that is our equation for electrical energy. But as I say, that depends on how long things are running for. So, ignoring time, that's basically what we're doing here. Ignoring the effect, of time. So that's quite a nice, useful little thing. We end up with the fact that P is W. Notice it's not change in W, it's just work done, because that is a mechanism rather than an amount. So work done over time, we end up with ITV over time, power equals IV. Okay, and that's our base equation for electrical power. It depends on how much energy is given out and how quickly it is delivered by the little charges. Okay, so our surge of charge carrying to give us out a certain amount of voltage, potential difference. Now, great equation, easy to remember, GCSE and so on, not that useful, because when you turn up, for example, the EMF on the power pack, so the other type of voltage, we get more current. Or if more current is flowing, we end up with more voltage dropped at each resistance. So both of them are affected, and we well know for Ohm's law that both of these are proportional to each other. So if you double one, you're doubling the other. So effectively you're getting 4 times the energy. So let's more simply try to get rid of one of the variables. So in our final box here, if we don't know the variables, we actually end up with far more useful equation. So using Ohm's law, I should say Ohm's law, the Ohm's law equation, V equals IR, then what we can do is substitute for these different things. So if we get rid of V, for example, I'll just put IR instead. Power equals I times IR, and so power equals I squared R. And that's a really useful little equation. I think that's the most profound of these, because what it means is as soon as you've got a current flowing, firstly you've got a circuit, but current, Kirchhoff's first law, where it flows, what it flows through is what gives us the energy being given out each second, so how quickly it's thrown out. So current flowing through resistors give you power. So that's our kind of, to me, profound thing. However, when you buy light bulbs, for example, they will have the power printed on and they'll have the voltage it runs off. So our circuits in the mains electricity, it's all 230 volts. It has that fixed voltage. So often you'll need to work it backwards the other way. So that means getting rid of I instead and putting V in. So if we want to replace I, we need V over R. So what we can do is P is V, just check it's the right way around. So V over R times by V, we end up with P equals V squared over R. Okay, so that's also a useful equation, but not as useful as that one. It is, though, an easy way of telling how much voltage, for example, is dropped as energy is lost from power lines, for example. So you've got the resistance from the length and cross-sectional area of our wires. So resistivity can give you resistance. If we know the energy loss, then we can tell how much voltage has been dropped. So if you were, for example, to connect a lawnmower on a lead to a very long lawn, so you connect a whole load of leads together, you're going to have bigger and bigger resistance, you're going to have a bigger, in the wires, longer wires, you're going to have a bigger loss, which means that your 230 volt lawnmower might only actually receive something like 200 volts. So it has less energy delivered to that because most of it has been lost by the wiring instead. Okay, so that kind of idea is what's limited in the bottom here. Anywhere where there is a high current, then we are going to get a high energy loss, a great big power, unless of course, back to last lesson, we can make R 0, because then wherever current flows in a resistor of no value, then we will get 0 power loss. So again, one extra thing from superconductors is that we can use them to store really large currents because we don't lose any energy, so we don't need to keep supplying energy from our battery to make it run. So once our current starts flowing, it just keeps flowing because there's nothing to take away the energy. So interesting little thing. Okay, so a little bit of extras, little bit extra detail there. We're going to look next lesson at how it links in with some other bits and pieces. Okay, which is, excuse me, thrown up there. So where our biggest kind of losses that we don't think about, but for this, what I want you to do, sorry, for this section, what I want you to do is go back in and have a play around with the other factors which link them together. Okay, so play around with the equations. Now, before we do, just want to add in one bit more that isn't extra notes. You covered at GCSE, but I know that some people have struggled a little bit with it. So what we're going to do is kind of look at a more convenient version of these. So if I get my whiteboard a second, and we'll just go back into our basic idea. So let's go with that one there. Okay, our energy supplied, that's what I'm going to call it is, rather than the work done doing the energy transfer, equals VIT. Looks a little bit more neat. Okay. Now, let's take your 60-watt bulb. When you buy your electricity, you're buying how much energy you've been consuming, shall we say. So how much energy you've been transferring into useful forms. The more energy you use, the more energy you require. Usually the more time it's been running for, the more it's going to cost you. Okay, so if we look at your electricity bill, it is cost is energy times by cost per unit. So all you're doing is how many lumps and how much each lump costs. That will give you your total cost. Now, unfortunately, if we think about this, it doesn't really help us, because if we were to take, for example, an 11-watt lamp, because most of you probably got higher efficiency bulbs now rather than 60 watts, the LED equivalents will be 10, 11 watts to give you the same amount of light, but without the heating. So it's all coming out as light instead. Well, how long do you leave your lights on for? Let's say 5 hours. Okay, so 5 hours that you got your lights on. Obviously more in winter, less in summer and so on. So 11-watt bulb for 5 hours. Okay, how much does that cost? Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? It can't be much because it's just one light bulb. Well, if we use the ideas here, 230 volts, running a certain size of current will add up to 11 watts. Okay, so that's the power, the energy every second. Well, if we run that, then basically energy is going to be 11 times by 5 times by however many proper units through 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in 1 hour, 3,600 seconds. Now, if I put those together, I haven't done this off the top of my doing this off the top of my head, so bear with us. 1800, it's going to be 1980. I think there's another 0 on there. Okay, so 10 times 36. Yeah, so joules. Okay, that's just 1 day. you get your bill if you're paying yours via a standard bill approach. So when they bill you every quarter, that will be every 3 months, 5 days, 1 hour. How many days in 1 month? It's going to get really large. So what we do instead is we use a more convenient unit. And if you cast your minds back to GCSE, I'm sure you remember the unit was the kilowatt hour. So energy, say convenient unit, I should say electrical energy unit. So we go for bigger lumps, a bit like moles. You don't talk about particles in chemistry so much, you talk about a mole of gas or substance that you're reacting. So convenient energy units for electricity is kilowatt hours. Okay, kilowatt, hours, power, time. Okay, so it's exactly the same format. It is power times time, okay, which gives you energy, so it works. It's just that everything is scaled up. So how many joules in proper units will be one of these? Well, if we take the maths of it, we would have how many watts? 1000 watts times by time of seconds in hours, 3600. Okay, so that's 60 times 60, and if you put them together, we'll end up with 3,600,000. We'll do it in that form, or 3.6 times 10 to 8, 3.6 times 10 to 6 joules. Basically, that's your convenient unit. It makes everything 3.5-ish million times smaller, all the numbers 3.5 million times smaller. So if we look at the cost for our 11 watt bulb, okay, so again, 11 watt bulb, lamp, on for 5 hours. Oops. At, I think the present cost is around, obviously it depends on who you buy your electricity from, but if you are looking in the region of about 13-14 pence, so 14p per unit, then what we've got here is more realistic. Okay, if we put 11 over 1000, okay, and times it by time in hours, because that will give us kilowatts from watts, times 5 hours, well, we end up with 55 over 1000, which is going to be, so let's just write it out, 0.055. Okay, so that's how many units times by 14p is going to get you somewhere in the region of, and I should make clear, 14 pence, not pounds. So that's basically equivalent to around about, I don't know, 0.7 pence, not pounds, pence. Okay, so to run a bulb, for 11 watt bulb for 5 hours, it's going to cost you just over half a pence. If you are looking at an old bulb, a 60 watt bulb, that's 5 times bigger. It's a 60 watt bulb, same brightness, is going to cost you 3.5 pence. Okay, so it's going to cost you a lot more. Now, it might not seem much, but that's in one evening, and that's just one bulb. So, you know, when you think about the price of these high efficiency bulbs, low power bulbs, you very quickly recoup that cost. Okay, so if we're all mega efficient, lot less effect on the planet, but also will have a much bigger effect on your wallet. It's going to cost you a lot less as well. So guys, have a go through the questions, okay, with our humorous cartoon at the top, and if you go through, if you haven't already, make sure you go through the questions to do with resistivity, bog standard questions, very common type thing, little bit of an interesting one to think about practicals. How would you go about describing this? Really common to get describing practicals or describing a method in questions for the exams. Have a go with the superconductivity and semiconductivity. So again, it's more descriptive that, but there's a lovely question that we did part of in the lesson. And then have a go with the energy and power, and have a think about, you know, where it all joins together. Okay, so have a go with those. But yeah, nice simple idea to use. It's the basis of why we have the circuits, so really important. In terms of questions, just to give you a heads up, they may give you the power rating of a bulb in a circuit, and that might be your starting place. You might need your power and the voltage it's got to give you the resistance to then add the resistance up in the circuits. Okay, so practicing questions, you'll get used to it. They're not hard ideas, but a really profound, useful and important idea. All right, thank you very much, guys.